Well, hello again, and hope your week has really been going well. And it's my honor and privilege to present the next part of our series on kingdom royalty. If you haven't had the opportunity already, I'd encourage you to look at part 1, which was our intro, and then part 2 on kingdom identity and royalty. And today we're looking at part 3. If you picked up the last session, you'll know that we looked at, in a little bit of detail, the story of Joseph. And I want to pick up on him and do a bit more in-depth study on why Joseph actually ministered out of a royal identity. So let's climb right in there and let's have a look at the life of Joseph. Well, first of all, Joseph had an excellent spirit. In Daniel chapter 6, verse 3, it actually says that Daniel too had an excellent spirit. It actually uses those words. See, Joseph was a slave. And he was stripped of everything. He was stripped of his wonderful multicolored coat. He was thrown into a pit. He was betrayed by family, sold to Ishmaelites, sold as a slave into Potiphar's house. And with all of that went on as a backdrop, you could imagine, Joseph might have had a bit of an attitude. He might have thought to himself, well, God, you've abandoned me. He might have thought to himself, well, what's the point of actually working or doing anything constructive, because I shouldn't be in the situation that I'm in. But one thing about royalty is they raise the normal. Romans chapter 16 verse 19 says these words, "Be excellent at what is good and be innocent of evil." Excellence doesn't make you royalty, but royalty means you're excellence. And what is so amazing about Joseph's life is he had excellence in everything that he did. Even though all the circumstances just weren't great or flash for him, he kept that excellent spirit going. And the other thing about Joseph, in terms of working out of his royal identity, is royalty presents like royalty. I want to pick up the story of Joseph in Genesis chapter 41 and verse 14. And it reads, "Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon, and he shaved and changed his clothes and came to Pharaoh." You may have heard that passage of scripture taught along these lines. Well, Joseph, of course, he had to shave and clean his clothes and at least change his clothes because, hey, he'd been in the dungeon for 13 years. He would probably look pretty bad. Well, that could have been the case, but I want to suggest something far more important was going on. The king's dungeon where Joseph was kept was where all the king's prisoners were put who had offended Pharaoh. Because Joseph was in charge of the dungeon, he would look after all of Pharaoh's prisoners. So what he would do is he would ask them, "What's going on? How come you're here? What did you do wrong?" And every time he was told a story by one of the inmates, he was taking notes. And he was thinking to himself, right, this is what you do when you stand in front of Pharaoh. So by the time Pharaoh called Joseph when he had the dream, Pharaoh, at least Joseph, was ready. He knew exactly what to do. He knew how to stand, how to talk, and how to present himself. So much so that in chapter 41 and verse 37 and 38, it says these words. So the advice, this was the advice that Joseph gave post-interpreting the dream. So the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you." A lot of focus is put on Joseph's ability to interpret dreams. And yes, that was a powerful sovereign impartation that Joseph walked in. However, what is interesting though is that Pharaoh never made a decision without the consultation and the approval of his court. And what is interesting is that even though Pharaoh, Genesis 41 and 8, had called the astrologers and others in to try and interpret the dream, what caused Pharaoh to actually accept Joseph and give him this astonishing promotion was Joseph found favor with Pharaoh's court. What does that mean? Joseph knew the protocols and the ways that Pharaoh's court operated. So when he had the opportunity, the God-given opportunity to stand in front of Pharaoh, you see his gift opened the door for him to get into the court, but his character, his wisdom, and his excellence kept him in the room. It's interesting with royalty, when you study it, if a royal family is going to go and visit another country, they spend months, sometimes years, preparing themselves to understand the protocols, the ways, and the mannerisms that are acceptable culturally in that country. So that when royalty visit that other country, they are representing their own nation really well, but also they don't do anything to embarrass themselves or to put themselves in a bad light when they go to a new country. And that is what royalty do, is they figure out where they're going or what they need to do in a new context, and what they do is they study it up, and then when they get to that place, they know exactly what they're doing. Royalty, number 3, don't dismiss the season they're in, they discern the season. Not many people are called to pay the price that Joseph was called. But what I want to stress to you is that everything that happened in Joseph's life was connected. As I said before, he got sold into slavery. He got put into the king's dungeon. From the king's dungeon, he stood before Pharaoh. From standing in front of Pharaoh, he got the biggest promotion in history, jailbird to prime minister overnight, and he got the rulership of the entire nation, to the point where he became a father to Pharaoh. So you may be right now in a situation that feels like a dead-end job. You may be really hating the place that you're in and thinking, God, I didn't sign up for this, I don't deserve this. But here's the challenge. You don't know what this season means in the seasons to come. You don't know what God is doing and how He's actually preparing you so one day you too can stand in front of Pharaoh. Joseph went to Potiphar's house to learn administration. He went to the king's dungeon to learn what? To learn how to operate and navigate the courts of Pharaoh. So his administrative training and his training in the dungeon prepared him to one day rule a nation and save thousands, maybe millions of people from starvation. Well, I really hope this has been a blessing to you today, and that you'll continue to track with this series on kingdom royalty and what it means to live out our kingdom identity. God bless. Have a great week. Looking forward to seeing you next time.